What I'm about to tell you will make you question every piece of human hair you've ever worn, every Brazilian bundle you've coveted, and every expensive weave you've considered buying. This is not just another story about beauty and vanity. This is a tale that will reach into the depth of your soul and shake the very foundation of what you think you know about the hair industry. Gather close, my people, for I have a story that our ancestors would have whispered around flickering fires, a cautionary tale that echoes through the spiritual realms and into our modern world. In the heart of our cities, where neon lights blind us to ancient truths, there exists a darkness so profound that it feeds on the dreams of young women, devouring their destinies one strand of human hair at a time. You see, there was once a girl named Sandra. Brilliant Sandra, whose mind was sharper than a warrior's spear, whose future blazed brighter than the morning sun over the savannah. She was the pride of her family, the envy of her peers, the girl who carried the hopes of an entire community on her shoulders. But all of that, every single dream, every carefully laid plan, every prayer whispered by her mother, would crumble because of one seemingly innocent purchase. Now, before you dismiss this as mere superstition, let me remind you of something our grandmothers knew well. In the depth of our oceans, in the mysterious waters that surround our continent, dwell ancient spirits. Marine spirits, we call them. These are not the benevolent water deities of old, but cunning entities that have adapted to our modern world. They have learned to trade in something far more valuable than gold or diamonds. They trade in human destiny itself. These marine spirits have established what can only be described as a supernatural syndicate, a network so sophisticated that it would make the most organized crime families pale in comparison. They have infiltrated the very industry that promises to make women beautiful. The human hair industry. Brazilian hair, Peruvian hair, Indian hair, names that roll off our tongues like promises of transformation, but hide secrets darker than the ocean depths. By the end of Sandra's story, you will understand why that beautiful Brazilian hair extension sitting in your closet might be more than just processed keratin. You will discover how marine spirits harvest not just hair, but the very essence of young women's futures. You will learn why Sandra, the brightest star in her academic galaxy, became a cautionary tale whispered in dormitories and beauty salons across the continent. Now let me tell you about Sandra in her golden days, when her name was spoken with reverence in every classroom, when teachers would pause mid-sentence just to marvel at the brilliance that radiated from this extraordinary young woman. Sandra Okafor was not just another student in the prestigious federal government college. She was a phenomenon, a walking testament to what the human mind could achieve when blessed by the ancestors and nurtured by unwavering determination. At 17, she had already broken every academic record the school had seen in its 50-year history. Mathematics bent to her were like young branches in her hands. Sciences unfolded their mysteries to her as if she possessed some ancient key to universal knowledge. Her teachers would gather in the staff room, shaking their heads in wonder as they compared her test scores. 98% in advanced mathematics. 100% in chemistry. 99% in physics. These were not just numbers on a report card, they were prophecies of a future so bright that even the sun seemed dim in comparison. The principal had already begun reaching out to universities abroad, knowing that Nigeria's educational system, excellent as it was, could barely contain the intellectual fire that burned within Sandra. But it was not just her academic excellence that set Sandra apart. She possessed that rare quality that our elders called home training, the kind of character that made elderly women stop her on the street to pray for her, the kind of respectfulness that made market traders refuse her money, insisting instead that she take their goods as gifts for her family. She was the girl who helped younger students with their homework without being asked, who organized study groups for struggling classmates, who carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone destined for greatness. In her family's modest three-bedroom apartment in Suraleh, Sandra's certificates and trophies lined the walls like golden tributes to a living legend. Her father, a hardworking mechanic, would invite neighbors to witness his daughter recite chemical formulas with the same ease that praise singers recited ancient lineages. Her mother, a petty trader who sold provisions in the local market, had already begun saving every naira she could find, dreaming of the day Sandra would graduate from a foreign university and return home as Dr. Sandra Okafor. The family's hopes and dreams converged on Sandra like tributaries flowing into a mighty river. She was their lottery ticket to a better life, their proof that poverty was not a permanent condition, their living evidence that with education and determination, any African child could conquer the world. But destiny, my people, can be as fragile as morning dew, and sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. But even the most brilliant diamonds can develop cracks under pressure, and Sandra's perfect world was about to encounter forces that would test the very foundation of her character. You see, Federal Government College was not just a school, it was a microcosm of Nigerian society, where the children of politicians mingled with the sons and daughters of struggling civil servants, where designer uniforms competed with carefully mended hand-me-downs. And in this environment, a new kind of currency had emerged among the senior girls: human hair extensions. It started gradually, like poison seeping through clean water. First, it was Chioma, the daughter of a wealthy oil executive, who arrived at school one Monday morning with flowing Brazilian hair that cascaded down her back like a waterfall of silk. Then came Blessing, whose politician father had gifted her Peruvian bundles worth more than Sandra's family's monthly income. Soon, everywhere Sandra looked, her classmates were transformed, no longer the simple schoolgirls she had grown up with, but glamorous young women who seemed to have stepped out of music videos. Sandra tried to focus on her studies, tried to remember her mother's words about inner beauty and academic excellence being the only adornments a young woman truly needed. But every day became a battle against whispers that followed her in the corridors. Look at Sandra with her natural hair, they would snicker. So brilliant, but so outdated. Even with all her intelligence, no man will want her looking so local. The words cut deeper than any physical wound, because they awakened something Sandra had never acknowledged before: doubt. For the first time in her life, she began to question whether academic excellence was enough. She started avoiding mirrors, became conscious of her reflection in classroom windows, felt a strange shame about the beautiful natural hair that her grandmother had always called God's crown for African queens. Then there was Emeka, the boy who had captured Sandra's heart with his sweet words and gentle manner. Emeka was different from the other boys. He appreciated her intelligence, encouraged her dreams, and spoke of a future where they would both become successful professionals. He was studying to become an engineer, and their relationship had been built on mutual respect and shared ambitions. But even Emeka began to change as the pressure mounted. At first, his comments were subtle, gentle suggestions that maybe Sandra could do something with her hair for their upcoming school social event. "You're so beautiful, Sandra," he would say. "Imagine how stunning you'd look with some Brazilian hair. Just for special occasions." The turning point came during the school's annual cultural day, when Sandra watched Emeka's eyes follow Chioma across the courtyard, lingering on her flowing human hair extensions with an expression Sandra had never seen before, desire mixed with something that felt dangerously close to disappointment when his gaze returned to her. That night, alone in her dormitory bed, Sandra made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her entire existence. She decided to ask Emeka to buy her human hair extensions, Brazilian hair specifically, the kind that would make her fit in, the kind that would make him look at her the way he had looked at Chioma. Have you ever felt pressure to fit in, to change who you are just to meet society's standards of beauty? Drop a yes in the comments if you can relate to Sandra's struggle, because what happened next will show you why sometimes the price of fitting in is far higher than we could ever imagine. Now, before we witness Sandra's fateful encounter, you must understand the dark machinery that was already turning, waiting to ensnare her dreams. For this is not a tale of mere coincidence, but of ancient forces that have learned to hunt in the shadows of our modern world. In the depth of our oceans, where sunlight has never touched and where time moves differently than it does on land, there exists a kingdom that our ancestors knew well but modern minds have chosen to forget. The marine spirit realm, a parallel dimension where powerful water entities have ruled for millennia, being so ancient that they remember when the first humans walked the shores of Africa. These marine spirits, known by many names across our continent, Mommy Water, Umoja's darker cousins, the water people, have always been masters of seduction and spiritual manipulation. But as the world modernized, so did their methods. No longer content with claiming fishermen and coastal dwellers, they set their sights on something far more lucrative in our contemporary society: young women's destinies. The beauty industry became their perfect hunting ground, and human hair extensions became their weapon of choice. You see, hair in African spirituality is not just keratin and protein. It is an extension of a person's spiritual essence, their ancestral connection, their very life force. When you wear someone else's hair, you create a spiritual bridge between yourself and the original owner. And if that hair has been spiritually contaminated, blessed by marine spirits, or harvested from their underwater realm, that bridge becomes a highway for possession. The Marine Spirit Syndicate operates with the precision of a multinational corporation, but with powers that transcend physical reality. They have established what can only be described as spiritual franchises across major cities in Africa and beyond. These are not your typical beauty supply stores, they are recruitment centers, processing plants for human souls, carefully disguised as luxury hair boutiques. Their agents walk among us, appearing as successful business people, wealthy hair vendors, and influential beauty entrepreneurs. These human agents have made Faustian bargains with the marine spirits, unlimited wealth and success in exchange for helping to harvest young women's destinies. They can be identified by certain signs that our grandmothers would have recognized immediately: an unnatural coldness in their eyes, an aversion to holy water or blessed oil, and most tellingly, their hair stores always smell faintly of the ocean, even when located hundreds of miles inland. The spiritual mechanics of their operation are devastatingly efficient. First, they target ambitious young women, students like Sandra, entrepreneurs, career-focused ladies, because ambition creates a spiritual hunger that makes the soul more receptive to their influence. The human hair extensions they sell are not ordinary hair. Each bundle has been ritually prepared in underwater shrines, blessed with marine spirit essence, and programmed to slowly siphon the wearer's destiny, transferring their academic excellence, career prospects, and spiritual protection directly to the marine realm. But this is where the true evil reveals itself. The marine spirits do not simply steal, they replace. As they drain a woman's ambition and intelligence, they flood her mind with an insatiable thirst for material things, sexual desires, and a desperate need for male attention. The transformation is gradual but irreversible, turning brilliant students into what society cruelly calls runs girls, successful women into spiritually bankrupt shells of their former selves. And Sandra, our brilliant Sandra, was about to walk directly into their web. The shop stood at the corner of Victoria Island's busiest street, its gleaming glass windows displaying human hair extensions like precious jewels in a treasury. Divine Hair Palace read the golden letters above the door, and everything about it whispered of luxury and success. This was exactly the kind of place Emeka had suggested: upscale, expensive, the type of hair store where Lagos's elite women came to transform their appearance. Sandra entered with Emeka on a Saturday afternoon, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had never spent so much money on her appearance before, and the 50,000 naira burning in her purse represented 3 months of her mother's savings, money meant for Sandra's university applications, now redirected toward fitting in. The store owner, a woman who introduced herself as Madame Folek, emerged from the back room like a queen greeting her subjects. She was stunning in an unsettling way, ageless beauty with skin that seemed to shimmer under the store's lighting, and eyes so deep they appeared almost black. Her own hair flowed in perfect waves down to her waist, clearly the finest Brazilian extensions money could buy. But there were signs, warnings that Sandra's ancestors would have recognized immediately. The store, despite its air conditioning, felt unusually cold. A faint smell of seaweed lingered beneath the expensive perfumes and hair products. Most telling of all, when Madame Folek smiled, her teeth seemed too white, too perfect, and for just a moment, Sandra could have sworn she glimpsed something scaled behind those perfect lips. "Oh, my dear," Madame Folek purred, her voice carrying an accent that seemed to shift between Nigerian and something else entirely, something that sounded like waves crashing against rocks. "You want Brazilian hair, yes? I have something very special for you. Very special indeed." She disappeared into a back room that seemed to stretch deeper than the store's physical dimensions should have allowed, returning with a box wrapped in blue cloth that smelled strongly of the ocean. Inside lay the most beautiful human hair Sandra had ever seen, lustrous, silky strands that seemed to move with a life of their own even in the still air of the shop. "This one," Madame Folek whispered, her fingers trailing through the hair with an almost reverent touch, "this one came from a very special place. It will make you irresistible, my dear. Men will worship you. Opportunities will flow to you like rivers to the sea." As Sandra reached out to touch the hair, a chill ran down her spine. For just a moment, she could have sworn she heard something, a sound like distant singing, like voices calling from beneath deep waters. But Emeka's encouraging smile and Madame Folek's hypnotic assurances drowned out any warnings her spirit might have been trying to send. The transaction was completed with an efficiency that felt almost ritualistic. As Sandra handed over the money, Madame Folek's fingers lingered on hers, cold as ocean depths, and something passed between them, something that Sandra would later realize was the first thread of her destiny being severed. The transformation began the moment Sandra's hairdresser finished installing the Brazilian hair extensions. As she looked in the mirror of the small salon near her school, something shifted behind her eyes, a flicker of change so subtle that even she didn't recognize it at first. But the ancestors watching over her felt it immediately, a cold wind that swept through her spiritual defenses like water through a broken dam. That very evening, as Sandra walked back to her dormitory, she found herself noticing things she had never paid attention to before. The way the security guards' eyes followed her new flowing hair. The admiring glances from male students who had previously seen her only as the brilliant, untouchable academic star. For the first time in her life, Sandra felt a strange thrill at this male attention, a hunger that had nothing to do with intellectual achievement. Within days, the changes became impossible to ignore. Sandra, who had once spent her evenings buried in textbooks and research papers, found herself standing before her dormitory mirror for hours, running her fingers through the extensions, admiring how they caught the light. The advanced mathematics that had once bent to her will like clay in a master sculptor's hands now seemed unnecessarily complex. Why struggle with equations when she could be perfecting her makeup? Why memorize chemical formulas when she could be learning how to make men desire her? Her roommate, Blessing, noticed first. "Sandra, you didn't submit your chemistry assignment yesterday. That's not like you at all." But Sandra just shrugged, examining her reflection in her phone screen. "There are more important things than chemistry," she replied, words that would have been impossible for the old Sandra to utter. The decline was swift and merciless. Test scores that had consistently soared above 90% began plummeting into the 70s, then 60s. Teachers who had once competed to have Sandra in their advanced classes watched in bewilderment as she arrived late, distracted, more interested in the male students' reactions to her new appearance than in the lessons being taught. But it was the thirst that truly marked her transformation, an insatiable hunger for male attention, for expensive things, for a lifestyle that her academic scholarships and family's modest means could never provide. Sandra began noticing older men with expensive cars who lingered near the school gates. She started calculating not the trajectory of projectiles in physics class, but the cost of the designer bags her classmates carried, wondering how she too could afford such luxuries. Her family felt the change during her next weekend visit home. Her mother, who had raised Sandra to greet elders with respectful genuflection, watched in shock as her daughter barely acknowledged the neighbors who came to inquire about her studies. Instead, Sandra spent the entire visit taking selfies with her new hair, posting them on social media with captions that made her father's mechanic friends whistle appreciatively. "This is not my daughter," her mother whispered to her father that night, tears flowing like rain in the dry season. What would you do if you noticed such drastic changes in a friend or family member? Because Sandra's transformation was only beginning, and the marine spirits were far from finished with their harvest. Within 6 months, the brilliant Sandra Okafor, who had once been destined for greatness, had vanished entirely, replaced by someone her own mother would struggle to recognize. The marine spirit's work was complete, and what emerged from their spiritual alchemy was a young woman whose every decision seemed designed to destroy the future she had once held so carefully in her hands. The final academic blow came during her WAEC examinations, the very tests that were meant to be her gateway to university excellence. Sandra, who could have solved complex calculus problems in her sleep, sat staring at basic mathematics questions as if they were written in ancient hieroglyphics. Her mind, once sharp as a warrior's blade, had been dulled by forces beyond her comprehension. When the results were released, the girl who had never scored below 90% in her life received grades so poor that her teacher suspected the exam board had made an error. The scholarship opportunities that had once fought for her attention disappeared like morning mist. Universities that had eagerly courted the academic prodigy Sandra had been were now sending polite rejection letters to the mediocre student she had become. Her family's dreams of Dr. Sandra Okafor crumbled like ancient clay pots dropped on hard ground. But Sandra no longer cared about university or academic achievements. The extensions had awakened hungers that demanded immediate satisfaction. Designer clothes, expensive makeup, luxury lifestyle, these became her new gods, and she was willing to worship them with her body and soul. It started with what she told herself were innocent arrangements. Older men who offered to take her shopping in exchange for her company. Business executives who enjoyed being seen with a beautiful young woman at upscale restaurants and hotels. Sandra convinced herself these were relationships, genuine connections with successful men who appreciated her beauty and sophistication. The line between companionship and commerce blurred gradually, then disappeared entirely. Soon, Sandra was moving through Lagos's nightlife like a moth drawn to flames that would ultimately consume her. High-end clubs in Victoria Island, luxury hotels where powerful men conducted business, private parties where young women like her were both ornament and entertainment. Emeka, the boyfriend whose innocent suggestion had started this nightmare, tried desperately to reach the Sandra he had once loved. But the girl who answered his calls was a stranger speaking with Sandra's voice, laughing at his concerns about her lifestyle, mocking his plans for their shared future. "You wanted me to be more glamorous," she told him during their final conversation. "Well, now I am. This is what you asked for." The point of no return came when Sandra moved out of her family home entirely, renting an expensive apartment in Lekki with money whose source she refused to explain to her heartbroken parents. She had crossed into a world where academic excellence was worthless currency, where her body had become her only valuable asset, where each day led her deeper into spiritual and physical danger. But the marine spirits were not finished with their harvest. The worst was yet to come. The consequences of Sandra's choices began manifesting like a storm that had been gathering strength in distant waters, finally making landfall with devastating force. It was during one of her routine medical checkups, required by the upscale establishment where she now worked, that Sandra received news that would shatter what remained of her world. The pregnancy test was positive, but that was only the beginning of her nightmare. The blood work revealed something far more sinister. She had contracted HIV from one of her many encounters in Lagos's dangerous underworld. The doctor, a kind woman who had seen too many young lives destroyed by similar circumstances, delivered the news with professional compassion. But Sandra sat in that sterile clinic room, staring at the test results as if they were written in a foreign language. The girl who had once mastered complex scientific formulas could barely comprehend the simple medical terminology that had just sentenced her to a life of chronic illness and social stigma. When Sandra finally found the courage to return home and tell her family, the scene that unfolded was heartbreaking beyond description. Her mother, who had once boasted to neighbors about her brilliant daughter, collapsed to her knees in their small living room, wailing like a woman who had just witnessed her child's funeral. Her father, the gentle mechanic who had sacrificed so much for Sandra's education, could not even look at her, his disappointment so profound that it filled the room like a toxic cloud. The pregnancy, which might have been a blessing in different circumstances, became another source of family shame. Sandra's condition deteriorated rapidly, her body weakened by the HIV and her spirit crushed by the weight of her choices. The expensive Lekki apartment became a prison where she spent her final months, abandoned by the men who had once showered her with money and gifts, forgotten by friends who feared association with her condition. The marine spirits had completed their harvest. They had taken everything, her brilliance, her future, her family's pride, her health, and ultimately, her life. Sandra passed away on a rainy Lagos morning, alone in a hospital ward, her beautiful Brazilian hair extensions the only reminder of the vanity that had cost her everything. She was 21 years old. The same age she should have been graduating from university with honors, the same age she should have been preparing for a master's degree abroad, the same age she should have been planning a bright future that would have made her ancestors proud. But destiny, once sold to marine spirits, can never be reclaimed. But Sandra's story is not unique, my people. Across our continent and beyond, thousands of young women have walked the same path, their destinies harvested by marine spirits operating through the human hair industry. In universities from Lagos to Accra, from Nairobi to Johannesburg, brilliant students mysteriously transform from academic stars into shadows of their former selves, all connected by one common thread: expensive human hair extensions purchased from suspicious vendors. The Marine Spirit Syndicate has been operating for decades, perfecting their methods with each generation. They target ambitious young women specifically because ambition creates spiritual hunger, making souls more vulnerable to their influence. Medical students who abandon their studies after buying Indian hair bundles. Engineering students who drop out to pursue sugar daddies after installing Peruvian extensions. Business students who trade their entrepreneurial dreams for the fleeting attention of wealthy men, all because they couldn't resist that perfect Brazilian hair weave. There are warning signs that our grandmothers would have recognized immediately, signs we must teach our daughters to identify. Hair vendors who refuse to reveal the source of their products. Stores that smell faintly of the ocean despite being miles inland. Vendors whose eyes seem unnaturally cold, who speak in accents that shift like tides. Hair that feels unusually cold to the touch, that seems to move on its own, that comes with promises of irresistible beauty and unlimited male attention. Most tellingly, these vendors often insist on cash transactions, refuse to allow customers to pray over the hair before installation, and become agitated when blessed oil or holy water is mentioned. They target young women during vulnerable moments, after breakups, before important social events, when peer pressure is at its peak. To protect yourself and your loved ones, remember that your natural hair is a crown blessed by the Creator himself. No Brazilian bundle, no matter how expensive, can improve upon the original design that connects you to your ancestors and your spiritual heritage. Before purchasing human hair extensions, pray over them, ask about their origins, and trust your instincts if something feels wrong. If you must wear extensions, seek vendors who are transparent about their sources, who welcome spiritual discussions, and who understand the sacred nature of hair in African culture. Better yet, learn to love and style your natural hair, for it carries the wisdom of generations and the protection of your ancestors. The marine spirits feed on insecurity and the desire to be someone other than who you were created to be. But when you embrace your natural beauty, when you find contentment in your original form, their power over you becomes as weak as sea foam on dry sand. Sandra's tragedy must not be repeated. Her story must serve as a lighthouse, warning other ships away from the rocks where so many dreams have been shipwrecked. And so ends the tragic tale of Sandra Okafor, a story that should haunt every parent, every young woman, every person who has ever stood before a mirror wondering if they are beautiful enough as they are. From the heights of academic brilliance to the depths of spiritual destruction, Sandra's journey serves as a stark reminder that some prices are too high to pay, some transformations too dangerous to attempt. Remember how this story began, with a girl whose mind blazed brighter than the morning sun, whose future stretched before her like an endless highway paved with golden opportunities. Remember how it ended, with a young woman dying alone, her destiny consumed by forces she never understood, her family's dreams buried with her in the red earth of Nigeria. The Brazilian hair extensions that promised to make her beautiful became the chains that enslaved her soul. The marine spirits that offered her irresistible allure delivered only insatiable hunger and ultimate destruction. The vendor who smiled while taking her money was harvesting far more than 50,000 naira. She was collecting Sandra's very essence, her brilliance, her future, her life. This is my final warning to you, my people. Every strand of human hair extensions carries the spiritual DNA of its original owner. Every bundle from unknown sources potentially connects you to forces beyond your understanding. Every time you choose artificial beauty over the crown your creator gave you, you risk walking Sandra's path. Before you dismiss this as mere superstition, ask yourself, have you heard similar stories? Have you witnessed brilliant young women mysteriously transform after wearing certain types of human hair? What's your take on marine spirits and their influence in our modern world? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, because your story might save another Sandra. If this tale has opened your eyes to the hidden dangers lurking in the beauty industry, hit that subscribe button and join our community of truth seekers. Until then, remember Sandra Okafor, and choose wisely.